Have you spotted a bird at your feeder and you don't know what it is? If so, then this is the video for you because I'm going to go through every single feeder bird found in the United States. And I'll also give you some secret tips to help you remember the names of some of your common backyard visitors. Also, if you stick around till the end, I've got a surprise bonus section for you at the end of the video. If you love birds, then this video is for you, no matter your skill level. So let's dive in. Okay, so now let's go over all of the potential birds that you could see in your backyard in the United States. So the first one is the American robin. We've got a pretty distinctive bird with a black head, that distinctive orange breast, gray back, and then this bright yellow bill. Really isn't any main confusion species here. It is in the thrush family, so its posture is going to be similar to birds like the wood thrush and stuff. But to separate it, just remember the American robin has a bunch of orange on its breast and belly, and then it has a fully gray back. If we look at the range of the American robin, you'll see that it's very widespread throughout the entire country and has a little bit of migration, but contrary to what most people think, that robins bring spring, they actually stay put for most of the year. So even in the winter, you can find robins. In the summer, they usually eat worms and insects, but in the winter, they're going to switch to a more berry-focused diet. Next one is the northern cardinal. Males and females do look pretty different, unlike the robin. Males are this bright red, and then females are a little bit duller, but both have the bright red bill that is pretty distinctive. And then they also have some black by the face. If we look at their range, the cardinal is more of a midwestern and southern bird. There is a small population in southern Arizona, and then I believe their range does go a little bit farther south into Mexico. Really not any confusion species throughout that range, and also they do not migrate at all. Next one is the house finch. We've got males here on the right and then a female here on the left. There is a few confusion species like the purple finch. I've actually got a whole video on that on my channel if you want to check that out. But to sum it up quickly, the house finch is just plainer overall. Like the female purple finch has a big white eyebrow right here, and then the male house finch is going to be more of a redder color compared to the raspberry purple color of the purple finch. When we look at that range, they are very widespread, and then there's not really any migration with these birds. Next one is the mourning dove, a very common and distinctive dove in the western United States. There are some confusion species like the Eurasian collared dove, but the mourning dove is just more of a buffier color. If we look at their range here, if you're in this eastern half of the United States, you really don't have to worry about any confusion species, as they are the only dove species found there. Next one is the black-capped and Carolina chickadee. The reason I've kind of grouped them together like this is they look very similar. The best way to tell them apart is by range. Here's the range of the black-capped chickadee. Here's the range of the Carolina chickadee. As far as separating them goes, the black-capped chickadee has a little bit more white on the edges of its feathers, and just overall is a lighter color compared to the duller gray color of the Carolina chickadee. However, if you're not in a little bit of overlap in their range, you really don't have to deal with separating these guys, which is pretty good because they are very similar and hard to separate. Next one is another distinctive backyard bird, and that is the blue jay. Very large for backyard birds. A lot of them are smaller than the blue jay, but we've got an all blue bird with a crest, and then they make a lot of noise, so you'll probably hear them before you see them. If we look at their range, more of the eastern half is where they like to be, but in the winter they can be found around here. The reason it's a lighter blue, usually it's a darker blue here, but I've made it a lighter blue because they are not very common in that area. So the next one is the American goldfinch. We've got a pretty small bird, but it is a bright yellow with a jet black wings. Females are a little bit dull. There really isn't any confusion species except for the lesser goldfinch found in Texas. American goldfinches are brighter, and then they have less black. A good tip for attracting these guys is to put out some Niger seed or thistle seed, as it's more commonly known. Because they have these cone-shaped beaks and they're smaller birds, they prefer smaller seeds like thistle seed. Compared to the sunflower seeds, they will eat those black oil sunflower seeds that most people put out, so it's not a bad option if that's the only thing they have to eat. They will eat it, but they definitely prefer thistle seed in a sock feeder. A little bit of a migratory bird, just they kind of come farther south in the winter and then will migrate farther north in the summer, but then there's a large population that just stays put throughout the whole year. Next is an introduced bird, the European starling, native to Europe and Eurasia. Very common bird found across the whole world. Very distinctive too. We've got a black bird with this bright yellow bill. They also have a very distinctive posture and silhouette, so pretty hard to miss. A lot of people don't like them, but they are fairly cool birds. But again, they are invasive, and so they do displace nesting areas for native local species that most people like. Again, very common bird found throughout pretty much the entire world. One of the most widespread birds in the world. Next one is the downy woodpecker. We've got pretty small woodpecker with black and white back, red on its head. Just the males have the red. And then the only other confusion species aside from like the red-bellied woodpecker, which is bigger, is the hairy woodpecker, and they do look pretty similar. But the downy woodpecker has a smaller and thinner bill compared to the larger, thicker bill of the hairy woodpecker. If we look at their range, it is pretty much identical to the hairy woodpecker. They don't like the Southwest, must be too hot for them. But yeah, range you really can't separate from the hairy woodpecker because it's pretty identical. Next one is the song sparrow, probably one of the most common sparrows in the United States. It will come to bird feeders occasionally, but not that common of a backyard feeder visitor. There really isn't a whole lot of sparrows to separate them from that would be in your backyard. Just look for that central dark breast spot, and then they've got a lot of brown streaking on them, and then a pretty busy face pattern. As far as range goes, here's their range map. They do migrate a little bit, and then some of them stay put throughout the rest of the year. Next one is the red-bellied woodpecker, and you might be looking at its bright red head and wondering why it got that name, but it does have a little wash of reddish pink color on its belly, and the red-headed woodpecker is already taken. It's already a bird, but this is a pretty common backyard visitor throughout its range. There's not a whole lot of confusion species. If you're in Texas, you have to deal with the ladder-backed woodpecker, which looks pretty similar, but the red-bellied woodpecker is going to be larger. And then to separate it from all other backyard woodpeckers, just look at its white belly and then bright red head, and then there's black and white barring on its back. Next one is the Carolina wren, pretty cute looking wren that is fairly common in the southeast, although I will say their range is increasing northward a little bit, so if you're up in this area here or here, keep an eye out for them because you might occasionally see one in your backyard. They're not super common, but their range is going further north a little bit. Overall, we've got a dark brown wren with a slight brown wash over its belly, and this white eyebrow stripe is really helpful for separating it from all other backyard wrens. Next one is the white-breasted nuthatch. There's two main species of nuthatches that come to feeders, the red-breasted and the white-breasted. The white-breasted, of course, has a white breast and then a black cap, and then a gray back, great for separating it from the red-breasted nuthatch, which has a lot of red in the face and belly area. So that's really your main confusion species throughout its entire range. Next one is the house sparrow. Here's the female. They are introduced to the United States, and so they are invasive and compete with other local birds for nesting spots and food. It's one of the most common birds in the world. Males have this black on the face and then a brown back. Females are a little bit duller, but they have this white area, kind of like a eyebrow stripe there, which can be really helpful for separating it from other species. Another good way to separate it from other sparrows is they've got these streaks on the back that go down like that. That can be really helpful for separating from other birds that may look similar to the house sparrow. Next one is the tufted titmouse, pretty distinctive bird, overall gray with this crest. Titmice can be separated pretty much just by range. So in this area, you're going to have the tufted titmouse. In Texas, you're going to have the black-crested titmouse. Around here, you're going to have the juniper titmouse. And then in California, you're going to have the oak titmouse. So range is the best way to separate titmice. So just if you are out here and you saw titmouse, just Google, like oak titmouse range or juniper titmouse range, and you'll be able to see if you're in the range of titmice. Yeah, other than that, that's really a great way to separate them just because their ranges don't really overlap. And then in southern Arizona, you have the bridled titmouse, which is a really neat bird. Next one is the common grackle, a fairly large bird with this long tail. And then the males have an iridescent color. The females are a little bit more of a duller blackish gray. Throughout their range, they are really the only black bird. Around here in Florida by the Gulf Coast states and all the way up here, you're going to have the boat-tailed grackle, which is larger and has a much longer tail. And then out west, you could deal with the great-tailed grackle, especially in Texas. They can be quite common and can be kind of hard to separate, especially the females. But great-tailed grackles are just going to be bigger, and the males especially have very long tails. And then the final confusion species for the common grackle is right up around here in the west. You're going to have the brewer's blackbird. And they look pretty similar. They both have this yellowish eye, but the brewer's blackbird is going to be smaller and its bill is going to be a lot shorter. The bill of the common grackle is really pretty big, and then it does curve a little bit. Next bird is the dark-eyed junco, and this is the main subspecies, the slate-colored subspecies. It's going to be found all throughout here. But in the west, there are a few more subspecies, like the Oregon subspecies or the pink-sided subspecies. Generally, they all have the same shape. They both got this dark eye, plump bird with a long tail, and then a pink beak. So that's a good way to separate them from all other sparrows. And then the slate-colored subspecies is really pretty distinctive throughout its range. As you can see, more of a winter bird, especially for most of the country, and that is going to be the slate-colored subspecies that comes to this whole area. Next one is personally my favorite bird, or at least one of my favorite birds, and that is the cedar waxwing. Really a pretty small bird, probably a little bit larger than a titmouse would be, but they've got this crest and then just a tan color, black mask, great for separating it from a titmouse, even though their shape is fairly similar. Their colors are a lot different, and then looks like their tail is dipped in wax, which is where they get their name from. More of a northern bird, and then they do come further south in the winter. These birds love berries, so if there's any berry trees around you, keep an eye out, especially during the winter for these guys, because they love to eat berries, and they could be found there. Next one is the northern mockingbird. Pretty distinctive, gray bird, fairly large. It does have these two white wing bars. It's well known for mimicking a lot of other birds. So if you think you hear a bird coming from deep inside a bush, you might want to check again, because it could be a mockingbird mimicking another species, and then they are very widespread. Next one is the chipping sparrow. If we look at their range, more of a summer species. They migrate south for the winter, except for Southern California and part of Arizona. Pretty distinctive too. They've got this orange cap, a black stripe that goes through the eye, which is probably the best way to separate them from all other sparrows. Just look for that black stripe going through the eye, combined with the gray belly, and then their tail is a little slightly forked too. Next one is the gray catbird. So if you think you hear a cat calling from a bush, it might actually be one of these guys, especially during the summer, and then they winter on the East Coast and part of Texas here. But overall distinctive, gray bird, black cap. Really not any confusion species that you're going to run into with these guys. Next one is the Baltimore oriole, another migratory species. As far as orioles go, there's really only one other confusion species in its range, and that is the orchard oriole. Orchard oriole is going to be a dark, like kind of almost burnt brown color with some black on it. And then the Baltimore oriole is a super bright orange with black cap and some white on its wings. Great for separating it. Again, they are highly migratory and are rarely ever found here in the winter except for Florida. Another bird that is pretty migratory is the barn swallow. Again, only found here during the summer. And then probably one of the easiest to identify swallows because of their big forked tail. That's a great way to remember them. If you happen to see one perched, you can see that there's like orange here and blue on the back and a white belly, but most of the time they're out flying around, so you're not going to see that. The main thing that you're going to notice is that big forked tail, which is a great way to separate them from other swallows. Speaking of swallows, we have the tree swallow next. Again, migratory. Pretty much all swallows are migratory. The tree swallow is actually the least migratory because it winters farther north than all other swallows, but it's a pretty unique swallow because it's got all this blue on it and white. When swallows are flying, it can be kind of hard to separate, but range can be a good way to separate them too. And then also pay attention to wing shape. That's a lot more in depth than I want to get for this video, but if you happen to see one perched, you'll notice that it is a bright iridescent blue color. Next one is the killdeer. You may have heard this bird before, as it calls a very distinctive killdeer song. And then it's found in pretty wide range of habitats. Like it could be found in a local wetland, and then it can also be found in a gravel parking lot because they like to nest on rocks. So they can be found in a lake shore and gravel parking lot, wetland. Very adaptable bird with a very large range, as you can see here. As far as shorebirds go, they're really pretty hard to identify, but the killdeer is fairly unique in the fact that it's got these two big breast bands and then a red eye, and then just overall pretty plain because it's got this brown back. And then for a shorebird, it is fairly large. So a lot of shorebirds are small, some of them are big, and then the killdeer is about medium size. Next bird is the rock pigeon, or just sometimes known as a pigeon, introduced to really the entire United States. Very common bird, pretty distinctive too. There really isn't a whole lot of confusion species. You could confuse it with doves, but doves are a much lighter color compared to the pigeons. Grayish, dark gray color. Next one is the red-winged blackbird. Males have this big red patch on their wing where they get their name. Females are a little bit duller, but just as distinctive if you know where to look. So the females have these streaks all over their belly, and then this white stripe right there, and then a brown cap. That's a great way to separate them from other blackbirds. And then a large range here as well. They migrate north during the summer to breed, and then a lot of them will stay put throughout the year. Next one is the brown-headed cowbird. Males have that brown head and then black body, and the females really don't have any markings. But the way you can separate them from other birds is their bill. So cowbirds have this really thick cone-shaped bill, and then birds like finches will have a cone-shaped bill as well, but the cowbird is going to be larger than a finch. If we look at their range, they do migrate west during the breeding season, where you could overlap with the brewer's blackbird, but the brewer's blackbird is going to have a yellow eye instead of an all dark eye. And then the next one is the Canada goose. Distinctive bird, and really only one main confusion species, and that is the cackling goose in the winter. So cackling geese are like a smaller cousin of the Canada goose, and they were actually considered the same species until 2002 when they were split apart into two separate species. Canada goose is larger than the cackling goose and has a longer bill. It's a great way to separate them. If you look at their range, they're quite common and are found in a lot of different habitats, from lakes to wetlands to city parks. They're a very adaptable bird and can be found in a lot of places. Before we get on to the bonus section that I think you'll really find helpful, go and tap that like button for me, as it helps more beginner birders just like you find this video, and subscribe to Better Birders if you haven't already, because I made this channel just for beginner birders like you. So next, let's go over some ways to remember bird names faster. So here's a few pro tips to help you remember bird names. Use repetition. Watch your feeder daily, because the same birds will show up over and over again. Say their names out loud while you're watching them. If a tufted titmouse flies to your feeder, say tufted titmouse. Also, start a feeder journal. Note what shows up, what time of day they like to show up, how many of them you see at one time. Also, make sure you keep track of any new visitors that you're not used to seeing at your feeders. Take photos. Even with your phone through a window, you can review these later to compare with field guides or apps. This can be especially helpful if you happen to see a bird that you're not familiar with, or maybe is rare and it's not really supposed to be at your feeder. I remember one time there was a couple common redpolls that came to my feeder, and it was the second county record. They really weren't supposed to be there. Usually they're a lot farther north, but I was able to get a picture of them, and I already knew what they were at the time. But if a bird like that shows up and you're not used to, you haven't looked at a field guide to see what birds farther north of you are, you really wouldn't have any idea what it is. And so having your phone handy or a camera is going to be really helpful in the event that something rare does show up at your feeder. Now, before we get on to the bonus section, I want to tell you about a fun and easy way to test your new feeder bird knowledge. I made a video where a picture of a backyard bird pops up, and then you try to guess what species it is. After 7 seconds, the answer pops up for you to be able to check yourself and see if you were right. It's a ton of fun, and you can watch it right here or here, I don't know. It's also in the video description below. Bonus tips for feeder success. If you want to attract more birds and get better at identifying them, try this. Offer a variety of food. Black oil sunflower seed is a favorite for almost all songbirds, but there's some other feeds you can try, like niter seed, more commonly known as thistle seed. That can be great for attracting finches. Suet is really good for woodpeckers, chickadees, nuthatches, especially in the wintertime. Suet can be really good for those birds. Peanuts for jays and titmice, and also in the summer, oranges or grape jelly can be really good for attracting orioles. Add water. A bird bath or shallow dish of water can attract species you won't usually see at feeders, like yellow-rumped warblers, orange-crowned warblers. These birds don't really eat seed because they're mainly insect eaters, so you're not going to have them come to your feeder unless there's like some bushes or something where they can find insects near. But water is a great way to attract birds like that. Be consistent. Birds will return to a reliable food source, so keep your feeders filled if you start. If you don't, or maybe they're empty for a couple days, don't worry, because there's a ton of food around your house, so birds will always have something to eat. You're not starving your local birds by missing a few days. But if you want to attract the most birds, keeping your feeders consistent and filled is definitely the way to go. Now, I mentioned the backyard bird ID video earlier, so you can go watch it right here. It's a ton of fun, and I highly recommend you go check it out, because it's a great way to increase your skills and test what you just learned. So go check it out right here. I'll see you there.